Okay, welcome back. In the last part we looked at putting this piping on our cushions here, so I've just gone ahead and taken the liberty of doing both cushions. So what we need to do now is bring this into Maya and give it a quick edit, because I really don't like these bulges at the top. They're a little bit too big. Now we could take less pressure off these. So if we have a look at our cushions, you'll see we've got a pressure value of 20 at the moment. So I inflated my cushions quite overly much. Now there does come a point with any simulation where it becomes easier just to throw the model in a 3D application and edit it directly. So let's do that. Let's just export this as an OBJ. Okay, and I'm going to call this couch from MD. So you'll see that I've gone and renamed my objects here, and I don't need the avatar. I'll take cushion 1 and cushion 2 and the main pattern, which will be this one here. Let's just make sure I don't have anything I don't need. No. Output in centimeters. Okay. Now if we pop open Maya, let's hide our proxy object here, because we are going to replace that now with our cloth object. So just Control H. And let's import this. So import. Okay, and let's import our couch from MD. Okay, so that's come in with the Marvelous Designer materials on it, which we'll sort out in a moment. And you'll see it's come in as one object. Now, if we do a mesh separate, that should separate out into its component parts. Okay, there we go. Sorry, viewport hiccup there. Alright, so I've got the two cushions and I've got the main kind of body of the couch here. So, as I said, I wanted to flatten these out a bit, so we're going to use a quick lattice deformer for that, and I'll grab and hide this table so it doesn't keep getting in the way. So just Control H on this. Let's come in here and add a lattice deformer to this. So just to create deformers, and I'll use a lattice. Okay, and the basic lattice that comes in, we don't really need that many divisions on this, so I'm just going to click lattice point, grab all those 4 and start pulling this downwards a bit. And I'll grab all these ones and yank downwards a bit and just kind of flatten this cushion out. You can take a bit more time than me, because I kind of don't want to spend too much time on this. Alright, and it looks like we've got a bit of bisection with the back of the couch, so if we just grab these back lattice points here, we can start to really sort of get this thing into shape. Now, we could have done a bunch of resimulations in Marvelous Designer to get this to a point where it was perfect, but as I said, sometimes it is just easier to come in your 3D program of choice, in our case Maya of course, and just kind of tweak this manually. So let's get this one to the same position as this one. So once again, create deformers and lattice, and just grab these lattice points. Okay, and you can leave your couch cushions kind of puffier if you want to. It's really personal preference for how you want the end result to look. But for me, that's looking pretty good. So I'll take the lattices off these. I'll just go edit, delete by type history. And that leaves us with a little more realistic couch cushions, I think. So we'll just put the standard Lambert 1 on these to get rid of those Marvelous Designer materials that we no longer need. And there we go, one couch. Okay, now I'm not going to go through the process of doing this one as well, because it's exactly the same as how we did this one. So I'm going to leave that to you. There is one last thing that I'd like to cover with Marvelous Designer, because we've done quite a bit of cloth now. And I might go back and resimulate some of this for the final screenshots, just at a lower particle distance. And I tried to give you an idea of several different ways to get things to to simulate out in Marvelous Designer. So we've taken a look at some animation, we've taken a look at just standard drapery with elasticity, you know, we've covered quite a lot of ground, so there's just one more thing that I'd like to actually cover, and that's a different type of curtain for up here. Now for this one I'm actually going to need a curtain rail, so I'm just going to use a polycylinder and just grab this and we'll move it into place. In fact, what I'll do is I'll just pause here and I'm just going to create a quick curtain rail. Okay, so I've made the quick curtain rail here. Now I've just put it into position above this window where I would normally want it, so I'm going to have my curtains kind of draped down here. The problem is that the Marvelous Designer pattern view, so if we have a look at this with the patterns here, is going to see this way as the front. So if I import this in now, I'm just going to get this little circle in my pattern viewport. There are a couple of ways to change that, but one of the simplest things we can do is just spin this around like so and export it now. So let's just go to File, Export Selection, and I'll just call this drape rail. I already have something that I made earlier, so there we go. Now I'll pop open Marvelous Designer and we'll just go to File, Open OBJ, Import OBJ, and bring in this drape rail. Remembering, of course, to choose the centimeters. And now you can see that I can see it here in my pattern view, so let's New Garment. Okay, just to get rid of that standard garment that comes in with Marvelous Designer, and let's draw a curtain so it'd be about, once again, half the length of the curtain rail. Okay, and synchronize across. Now just move this into position, and because I've opened up a new copy of Marvelous Designer, I'll obviously have to change that gizmo. Now what makes this curtain different to the other one is this one's actually going to be attached to the curtain rail, and I'm not sure what you actually call the technique, but I'll just bring up a picture. Okay, so I want to do these kind of curtain loops. Alright, so we'll dip back into Marvelous Designer, and I'll just start by simply going into my pattern view here, and we know we're going to need to attach these loops sort of every nth number of squares. So let's go and use our add point or split line. So we'll come in and we'll probably make these, let's see how many we are across. Okay, so I'll probably make these points, say, every second one. So let's go 2 here, and then we'll have a break for 4, and then 1 and 2. So this is where we're going to attach the loops to, and this will be the break in between. So let's do a break of 4, and then 1 and 2. Okay, this allows us to sew other pieces of material to just this line. So, and a break of 4 and loops at 2. So I'll just hit pause while I do this all along. So I've got to the end point and it's not going to line up if I break it here, so I'm just going to select this line, start to move it, hold shift so it's straight, and 1 and 2. So this gives me the points where I can come in and put my loops. So let's start with making the first part of the loop, and I'm not going to need it that long, so it's going to be about here. Okay, Control C and Control V, because I'm going to need 2 for each one. Then grab both, Control C, Control V, and just kind of get your loops into position here. Right, then we're going to need to line them up on the viewport. So easiest way, select them all here once again and move them in. Okay, now these loops, they're going to actually cross over this bar here. So let's move them in position with the bar. Okay, and let's get these top ones and flip them all around. So what we're going to do is stitch them up across the top and then stitch them to our curtain here. Whoops. And excuse me, folks. Okay, and I want to get these fairly accurate. Don't have to be, as I said before, spot on perfect, but you do want to get them sort of close-ish. Alright, there we go. So now we can proceed to stitch these to each other. So just come in here, use our sewing tool and start stitching. And you'll see that one there has been stitched, so we'll just come up all the way along the line. Okay, if I freeze this big bit of cloth now, just so we can see what happens when we simulate these out. There you go, curtain loops. So now all that remains to be done is to stitch them to this. So before I do any of that, because this wants to be a nice strong material up here so it doesn't break, for the time being I'm just going to add a new material to it, and I'm going to make it leather. So let's come down here and make this fabric 1, and let's make fabric 1 a leather preset. Okay, now with this still frozen, I'm going to actually stitch those together and make sure they all drape nicely across here. They do. Now I'm also going to give them a lower particle distance. This will help them not tear through the pole when all this weight is put on them. So let's just pop them back out again, go to scene. In fact, we can select them all here. We'll give them a particle distance of 10. Now that's pretty low, but these are such small objects that it'll still be pretty quick to simulate. There we go. So now we need to come in and stitch the bottoms of these to this thing. So let's move this thing into position. Okay, it looks about right, and get stitching. So free sewing tool, this one to this one, and this one to this one, and just go along and do that all the way along. Okay, there we go, that's all stitched together. So let's move this as close as possible so it doesn't put too much strain on those stitches. There we go, seems to be about right. And let's simulate and have a look at what we get. If it's possible, we'll get some tearing here. Okay, that's fine, perfect. So now let's unfreeze this and simulate proper. Okay, let's just let it drag down. Alright, and there we have a curtain hanging from curtain loops. Now you can obviously come along now and start pulling this about so it's, you know, a bit more attractive, because at the moment it's kind of just all bunched up in one place. So I'm just going to pull these loops up the top here, sort of get it a little bit nicer pattern in the whole thing. And you can see then I start to get that kind of downward cloth look that we would go for. And this is a really nice way of actually physically attaching a curtain to a curtain pole, because the previous one we did, if we take a quick look in Maya, it's not actually attached to anything, this curtain, because it's going upwards in this bay window, so we didn't need to. So I thought I'd just tell you another technique of actually attaching a curtain to something if you don't have the luxury of a bay window to kind of hide behind. So I'll just come in here now, and I'd keep moving these around until I got the drapery that I was happy with. Okay, and obviously you might need to adjust the length of this to fit your curtain and spend a little bit of time playing around, you know, just to get that drapery how you want it. But for me, these are also a bit wide, these curtain ties, you know, so you could go in and make them a bit smaller. and I'm not really going to be too bothered about this. I just wanted to demonstrate the principle of making these curtain tiebacks, as I've actually done these before in Marvelous Designer, and the first couple of methods I came up with doing them were a bit of a pain. So, you know, and they're now thinner and nicer looking. I can re-simulate, and that'll help give us some pinching up here as well. You know, so that's the technique. And there we go. So I'll be pretty happy with that as a sort of hanging curtain. It's nice to see these loops in, and now I could go ahead and model a bit nicer curtain rail for it. Alright, so that pretty much brings our Marvelous Designer tutorial to a close. I hope you stayed with me through both volumes of this, for both the modeling and the Marvelous Designer bit, and if you did, I will see you back in the texturing, where we'll be going over a couple of different volumes for at least Mental Ray and V-Ray, probably Maxwell too. So thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, you can get me on our forum over at Simply Maya, and you know, if you need any help, drop me a line. Cheers.